I grew up in a family where the loudest value was proximity. We lived within 40 minutes of each other. My parents in a brick ranch off County 12, my brother 5 exits closer to the city, me and my wife 20 minutes past the Costco. Sunday dinners were a habit like brushing your teeth. If you missed one, there had better be a fever involved. You could chart our family calendar by casseroles and birthdays, and the way my mother liked to say, nothing bad can happen if we're all under one roof. I used to believe that. These days, I hear it the way a firefighter hears the word fireproof. I'm not much for speeches at these things, so let me say it plain. My wife cheated on me with my brother. That's the sentence everything else hangs from. If I say it fast, it sounds like a headline. If I sit with it, I can feel the weight of each word. Wife, cheated, brother. The first time I said it out loud, it was to my own reflection in a dark kitchen window at 2 in the morning. It tasted like metal. Before it was a sentence, it was a series of small, ordinary alarms. You never get the big siren first, you get the quiet misalignments. The night my wife Erin called my brother Noah with the softness you save for nicknames, and then laughed too hard at her own mistake. The Saturday she showed up to my parents' barbecue wearing the gray hoodie I'd seen on Noah 3 days earlier. His old college hoodie with the frayed cuffs and the tiny paint smear under the left wrist where he'd helped me repaint our guest room last winter. The inside jokes that weren't inside mine. The texts she angled away from me, the ones where laughing, crying faces lined up like shields. Noah has always been the gravity in our family. The kind of brother who breezes into a room and redirects everyone's orbit. Charismatic to a fault. Did varsity everything without looking sweaty. Became a project manager who could talk a boulder into rolling uphill. Dated women who felt like events. 2 years ago, he settled down with a woman named Paige, who wore her hair in a low knot and color-coded her pantry. My mother loved Paige as if she'd knitted her herself. I liked Paige because she asked about my work and then listened to the answer. She was the sort of person who makes space for silence and doesn't rush to mop it up. My marriage to Erin was quieter. I'm a network engineer. I keep things running. That's who I am at home, too. The person who remembers the oil change and the water filter and the name of our mail carrier. Erin used to call me her human uptime. She's a high school counselor, the one kids go to when something is breaking. She brought home stories that made me want to shake the world. I brought home lists and grocery receipts. We were steady. We had a shelf full of cookbooks and arguments about whether basil belongs in everything. It does. I believed in us, the way I believe in well-labeled cables. If you do the little things right, you avoid the big failures. The first crack I can date was a Tuesday in February. Erin was texting with someone while we watched a show we never finished because life kept interrupting. She smiled at the phone in the way you smile at an inside joke catching you off guard. I asked who. She said, "Your brother," without looking up. "He's asking about the ladder in our garage." We hadn't used that ladder in 6 months. The next night, I found it leaning against the back fence like it had tried to leave on its own and gotten tired. It would have been easy to be paranoid. My job has wired me to see patterns and outliers, to scan logs for anomalies. But paranoia feels like lack of trust in yourself as much as in other people. I told myself I was being dramatic. I told myself we were adults who believed in boundaries and family and common sense. For a while, that worked. Then my brother and Erin started running together in the mornings. "Just 2 miles," Erin said. Paige hates running. She does barre. Noah wants a partner for the 10-miler in June. "We own a treadmill," I said, which didn't sound like the point even as the words left my mouth. She smiled the way you smile at a toddler insisting the ocean is a big bathtub. "Outside is different," she said, and tied her shoes like an answer. I tried not to be the kind of man who resents endorphins. I joined them once. Noah set a pace that made my lungs sound like Velcro. Aaron and my brother talked about podcasts and playlists, and I watched the tips of their shoes knocking out a rhythm I didn't feel invited to. After that, I ran alone or not at all. The next alarm was technical, because of course it was. We share an iCloud family plan. Aaron's Apple Watch backed up to our common storage. One afternoon, I was cleaning out old backups when a thumbnail popped up from her Voice Memos folder. Auto-synced, forgotten. Title: Tuesday Parking Lot. 30 seconds of audio. I didn't mean to tap it. I tapped it. That's the difference between accidents and choices. Most begin as the other. At first, it was ambient noise, the hush of cars. Then, Erin's voice, a register lower than she uses with me when she's soft. "Noah, stop," she said, the kind of stop that doesn't ask you to stop. A laugh. His voice, a murmur. He's probably at work. The scrape of a zipper. The breath people take when they start lying to themselves about oxygen. The file ended with Erin saying, "We have to be careful." I sat with my phone in my hand and stared at the counter where we keep a bowl for keys and receipts and grocery lists. There's a particular nausea that comes with proof. Suspicion is motion. You can pace with it. Proof pins you to the floor. I didn't storm into the hall and hold out my phone like a warrant. I closed the app, put the phone down, and did the thing I know how to do. I started a folder. I named it Plain Notes. I wasn't going to make it a murder board. I was going to collect evidence until I had either enough to stop my own brain from eating itself, or enough to face the fact that my marriage was not the thing I thought I lived in. You can learn a lot without breaking a single law. Door lock logs tell you when someone came in and out. Our smart thermostat logs occupancy patterns when it flips schedules. Location sharing that was meant for safety on road trips becomes a map of repetitions that make a story. I exported the watch backups and didn't open another audio file because I'm not a voyeur, and because 30 seconds had already made me older in a way a man doesn't come back from easily. I pulled our cell statements, not content, just numbers and timestamps. The patterns were a chorus. Late night runs to the grocery store that ended in neighborhoods where no grocery store stays open past 10. 30-minute windows when Aaron's location went blank and then reappeared a mile from where it should. Door sensor pings that said front door open, back door open, back door open, back door close, but no front door close because when you're carefully careless, you forget that your life keeps logs. If this were anyone else and not my brother, I might have confronted sooner. But almost every memory of childhood included Noah, which meant almost every defense did too. He taught me to ride a bike using the parking lot behind the Methodist church where Ms. Fowler couldn't see us. He chipped my tooth in the pool and convinced me to lie to Mom and say it happened on the stairs. He put a hand on my shoulder the day our grandfather died and said, "I've got the groceries, you get the signatures," like grief were divided into errands and paperwork. People show you who they are, and if you love them, you build them a place to be that person. Noah is a person who believes rules apply until they don't, that he is the exception because exceptions make the world interesting. We all built a place for that. I had too. It just turned out to be the same house where I slept. I tested myself before I did anything irreversible. I asked Erin to lunch near her school and watched the way her eyes moved toward the door every time it opened. I asked if she wanted to take a weekend away, someplace boring and restorative, a motel with a bad bed and a good view. She said she couldn't miss Noah's training runs. He'd lose momentum without her. The second she said it, she heard herself. She reached for my hand like a woman grabbing a railing. "Mark, that sounded bad," she said. "I didn't mean—" "What did you mean?" I asked. Because sometimes you have to ask the question you're terrified to hear the answer to. She squeezed my fingers so hard the rings bit. I meant I can't do anything big until after the March college fair. I meant I'm tired. I meant I want to sleep for 8 hours without dreaming about other people's kids and test scores, and you looking at me like you're waiting to solve me. I'm not trying to solve you, I said. I'm trying to live next to you. She looked away. The waitress put down our food and asked if we wanted more water. Aaron said yes in a voice that belonged to someone else. 2 nights later, my mother texted our family group chat, FamHQ, with a reminder about Dad's birthday. 40 guests, casual, she wrote, which is the kind of sentence only my mother can produce without comedy. Everyone pitch in. Paige, can you handle the green beans? Noah, chairs. Aaron, cake. Mark, the photo slideshow. Noah responded with a thumbs up and a second message. Got the chairs and the ice. Aaron replied, on the cake, and added a photo of a Pinterest masterpiece she'd never attempt. I typed, on the slideshow, then stared at the 3 dots as if they might confess something. I didn't pick the slideshow to be clever. I picked it because it put me in the attic with boxes of old photos and VHS tapes. Because it gave me an excuse to look at my father's face when he still believed he'd raise 2 sons who would always choose each other. I sat cross-legged on the den carpet with a stack of albums and loaded images into a timeline that mapped a life. Dad on a ladder painting the eaves, Dad in a cheap suit holding a certificate from an insurance company, Dad with both of us on a faded red couch watching a bowl game that mattered too much. I added Mom's hand on his shoulder in the kitchen, the way she'd steady him without making a scene. I added Christmases and bad haircuts and the dog we rescued that never quite learned not to run. Between slides, I put in short videos. Flicker clips of Dad teaching Noah to swing a hammer, a phone video of Dad crying at my wedding because the mic picked up his breath, and nothing makes me love him more than that. I made something good for a man who deserves good. Then I opened a new, separate folder and named it something harmless. Dad Birthday Extras. Inside, I made a document. At the top, I wrote, to the family, because you have to choose who you're talking to before you decide what to say. Under that, I typed 6 sentences that felt like water wearing a canyon. Dad, I love you. Mom, I know this isn't how you wanted your roof to leak. Paige, I'm sorry. I attached a handful of files that didn't require commentary. The 30 seconds from the parking lot, a list of dates cross-referencing cell logs with door sensor pings, a screenshot of Noah's shared Strava run that started at our house at 11:43 p.m. on a Thursday. I wasn't going to tell a story. I was going to drop facts into a chat where facts are usually recipes and invitations. If we were going to break, I wanted it to be because the truth didn't have a place to sit down, not because I'd gone looking for a fight. Dad's birthday landed on a thawed March afternoon that smelled like mud and charcoal. My parents' backyard filled with cousins and neighbors and the kind of laughter you hear from people who know where the bathroom is without being told. The rented chairs looked exactly like chairs. Noah carried a bag of ice as if he'd hunted it. Aaron's cake was responsible and pretty. The kind you buy from a woman who runs a bakery out of her kitchen and makes you feel like you're supporting a small economy. Paige wore a blue dress and poured lemonade like hospitality could be a shield. When the moment came, after the potluck applause, after the kids wandered off to play soccer using the good flower pots as goal markers, Mom clinked a spoon against a glass and asked everyone to gather. I stood by the patio table with the laptop hooked to a borrowed projector and clicked through a life. People laughed in the right places. Dad wiped his eyes and pretended he wasn't. Noah yelled, "That haircut was a crime," and everyone nodded. Aaron cheered when a photo of me as a teenage scarecrow flashed on the house, and I loved her for reminding me we had been silly once. The slideshow ended. People clapped. I closed the laptop and Mom hugged me like I'd handed her a marriage renewal in PowerPoint. "You always know how to do this," she said, and I almost didn't do the thing I had come to do because I wanted to keep that sentence. Then Noah stood and did the cookout speech, the one where he says the right words in the right order with the right jokes, and you feel your chest warm even if you know he's reading your family like a room he's paid to read. He raised a plastic cup and said, "To Dad, who taught us to make and mend, and I wanted to be the kind of man who could let that be the last true thing in a day." I excused myself to the bathroom and leaned my head against the door for 5 seconds. Then I took out my phone and opened Fam HQ. I attached the document. My thumb hovered. Somewhere outside the bathroom window, someone shouted, "Corner kick!" I hit send. The tiny blue bar moved across the top of my screen. "Delivered," the phone said, like a waiter who doesn't know the plate is hot enough to burn you. The first reply was from my sister, Jenna, who hadn't had lines in this story until now because she lives 2 states away and arrives in the family vernacular by FaceTime. "Is this a joke?" she wrote. Then the 3 dots. "Mark?" Then, "Why would you do this today?" Paige was next. "What am I looking at?" Simple. Honest. A request for a legend on a map. I typed, "I'm sorry. I tried to handle this privately. I couldn't find a door that didn't lock." Noah didn't type. He called. The phone buzzed in my hand like an animal. I let it buzz. He texted, "Answer." Then, "We need to talk." Then, "Don't do this." Erin's text hit hard enough that I had to sit down on the edge of the bathtub. "How dare you?" she wrote. "This is cruel." The word cruel landed like a brick on a scale that had been trying to stay balanced. Mom wrote, "Come outside, not a question." I turned the faucet on and splashed water on my face because ritual matters even when the church is on fire. I put the phone in my pocket and stepped back onto the patio into a different day. It's strange how sound changes when a group learns a new fact. It folds in on itself and then grows spikes. Conversations went thin. People looked at their plates like they'd been asked to recite what was on them from memory. Paige stood very still, her hands flat on the table, as if pressing the grain would let her feel the tree. Mom walked toward me with the smile she uses at church when someone asks about our family and she doesn't want to lie, but also doesn't want to talk. "Mark," she said softly, "what did you do?" "I sent the truth," I said, because the truth wouldn't fit in my mouth anymore. Noah moved into view like a weather front. "What the hell is your problem?" he said. Not theatrical, just loud enough that the 2 nearest neighbors could hear. "My problem?" I asked. And I suppose I shouldn't have asked, because it made this a scene, and my mother had set her life up to avoid scenes. "My problem is that you've been sleeping with my wife." He took 2 steps closer. I could smell the cologne he wears when he wants to smell like he made money. "Watch your mouth," he said. "Watch your hands," I said, which surprised me. I didn't know I had that kind of line in me. Erin's face was a study in calibration. She looked around at the guests, at my parents, at me, and decided who she needed to be. "We were separated," she said, pitching the sentence into the part of the sky where excuses fly. "We were figuring things out." She turned to my mother. "We didn't want to make it public until after Dad's party." I laughed once, a sound I didn't recognize. "We sleep in the same bed," I said, and hated that I had given her an easy line to deflect. She took it. "Sleeping in a bed doesn't mean a marriage is intact," she said, and I saw the counselor in her step onto a stage. Paige's voice cut clean through. "Were you sleeping with my fiancé?" The words landed without decoration. The kind of sentence that doesn't need a question mark to be a question. Noah held up both hands in the pose of a man asking for quiet in a meeting. "This is not what it looks like," he said. "Mark is. He's always been sensitive. He misreads things. I was helping Erin with running, with stress. Things happened. We're adults. We were going to talk to you." "After the party," Erin said, as if respecting the party were the same as respecting the people in it. Dad hadn't spoken. He was watching my phone like it might become a snake. When he finally spoke, it was to me. "Son," he said, You picked a hell of a time. There wasn't a right time, I said, but there is a time when you stop letting someone pack a parachute made out of lies. Jenna's face appeared in the sliding glass door, framed by the rubber seal, pixelated by a bad connection. "Put me down," she said, and my mother held out her phone so my sister could join us by proxy. "What is going on?" Paige looked at me. "Did you send me proof," she asked, "or did you send me a Rorschach test?" "I sent you timestamps," I said, "and I know how that sounds, cold, procedural. But I didn't trust my voice to do anything else." Mom placed a hand on Noah's arm, the way she does when she's reminding herself that he is not, in fact, 8 and climbing onto the shed roof again. "We talk inside," she said. "Family talks inside." "Paige is family," I said. Mom hesitated. It was the smallest thing, a half-second pause. It told me something I didn't want to know. We moved inside like a storm had started. The cousins were sent to the basement with a bag of chips that promised enough salt to buy us 15 minutes. Neighbors found their coats by intuition and melted. My father shut the sliding door and stood with his back to it like a man guarding a gate he never imagined he'd have to guard. In the kitchen, Mom went to the sink and put her hands on either side of it. She always does dishes when she's trying to make the world obedient. "Mark," she said, not looking up, "why didn't you come to us?" I thought about the folder, the 30 seconds, the lever of it all. "Because I knew you'd say to keep it in the family," I said, "and the family is the problem." Noah's laugh was quiet and mean. "There it is," he said. "Mark gets to be the martyr. Again." Paige spoke without taking her eyes off Aaron. "Yes or no?" she said. "Were you sleeping with him?" Aaron didn't blink. "Yes," she said. "And no one gets to pretend it was simple." Paige's mouth moved like she was practicing words she wasn't sure she wanted. "How long?" 3 months, Aaron said. "It started after Thanksgiving." She glanced at me and picked up a thread of mercy that wasn't for me. "We were struggling." "We were not struggling," I said, though maybe we were, and I had chosen to call it something less dramatic, like tired. Noah put his hands on the back of a chair and leaned into it like he could push the room into a new shape. "I should have told you," he said to me, and somehow that made me angrier than anything. The casual ownership of the confession. The idea that all this could be managed if only the right project manager had scheduled the reveal for a day with good weather. Dad cleared his throat. We can't do this here," he said, and his voice broke on the second "can't." He looked at Mom. She looked at him. They communicated in a marriage shorthand I used to admire and now mistrusted because it had trained them to protect the wrong thing. Paige took off her ring. "I wasn't expecting that, not that quickly." She slid it off and set it on the table with the care you use when you return a library book you loved. "I'm not a person who takes second helpings," she said to Noah. "You made me one. That's on you." She turned to Mom and Dad. "I'll come for my things tomorrow." Mom's mouth opened and closed like a fish remembering. It needs the water it lives in to live. "Paige," she said, "don't make any decisions in anger." Paige turned her face toward my mother and softened nothing. "I'm making a decision in clarity." Erin's eyes brimmed, but did not spill. She looked at me for the first time since we came inside. "We can fix this," she said. And for a second, I saw the girl I married, the one who believed lines on a page could make order out of chaos if the lines were kind and straight. "We can't," I said. I wanted to say more. I wanted to say that some things break along grains that were cut decades ago, that the good plate you bring out every Christmas will shatter if someone drops it hard enough, and you can glue it, sure, but you'll never stop looking at the crack. I wanted to say that I had already packed a bag, that my toothbrush had been in the bottom of my backpack for a week because I didn't know when the day would come that required it. What I said was, "I'm done." Noah leaned in again. "This is a witch hunt," he said. Mark's always needed attention." He looked at my parents for backup. And there it was, habit reaching for reinforcement. Dad, who had taught us that you can fix anything with the right screwdriver, did not look at me. He looked at the floor. Son, he said, and I didn't know which son he meant until he spoke again. Noah, take a few days. We'll figure it out. Mom finally met my eyes. Mark, she said, you embarrassed your father at his party. Whatever this is, it could have waited. What this is, I said, is your two children treating other people like optional furniture. She flinched. I don't know if it was the word children or furniture, maybe both. Jenna's voice came tinny from Mom's phone on the counter. I think we need to go offline, she said, as if this were a meeting that had drifted off agenda. It went the way these scenes go when the people in the middle of them have spent their lives pretending scenes don't happen. No resolution, no hug, no explosion big enough to force anyone into a choice they didn't want to own. Paige took her purse and left without saying goodbye. Aaron stood by the fridge as if the magnets were going to offer her a script. Noah did the worst thing he does, which is weaponize charm. He smiled at my mother, like her boy had gotten caught climbing the shed again, and said, I'll call you after I take Mark home. I'm not going home, I said. Not with you. Fine, he said. I'll walk you to your car. I drove with Aaron, I said, and hated the smallness of that sentence in my mouth. I'll call you an Uber, Noah said, and I wished for a version of myself that could say something clever, something that would make this sound like a clean break instead of a tearing. Mom stepped around the island and took my hand. Please don't do anything rash, she said. It's a sentence mothers are trained to say to sons. She squeezed once. We love you. We love you both. The room tilted. You can't love us both in this, I said. Not in the same way, not right now. We choose family, she said, like it was a spell. I laughed, and if I hadn't, I might have cried. That's what I did, I said. I leapt through the sliding door and crossed the lawn that had held every version of us, from arcs traced by sprinklers to the rectangle of the tent from my brother's engagement party. The sky was the color of a bruise. Cars dotted the curb like witness statements. I didn't go to my car. I went to the sidewalk and walked until the party noise became a texture instead of a sentence. At the end of the block, my phone buzzed again. Fam HQ lit up with messages stacking like plates in a sink. Jenna, everyone stop. Mom, we will talk tomorrow. Dad, come by at 9. Noah, call me. Aaron, please don't make this worse. Paige left the chat. The little gray line that appears when someone leaves looked absurdly formal. I opened a new thread and typed to Paige. I didn't have anything to offer her but the honest thing. I wrote, I'm sorry you were in the room for that. She replied a minute later, I'm sorry we were both in the room for that. At home, my home, for now. I packed the bag I'd half-packed already. Shirts that didn't wrinkle, the shave kit I keep for trips, the photo of my father holding a cat and laughing that I keep on my dresser. I sent an email to my apartment complex asking about month-to-month options because the life you think you're living is measured in leases and the one you're actually living arrives in 30-day increments. At midnight, the family chat reanimated. Mom, this has been hard on your father. Noah, we need to remember we don't air dirty laundry in public. Aaron, I'm not the villain you're all making me. Dad, we will be at church at 10. The words felt like a script that had run on the same stage for decades. I set the conversation to mute for 8 hours and put my phone face down like that could keep anything inside it from leaking. I lay on the couch because the bed had too many ghosts in it. The heater clicked. A car alarm chirped a few blocks away and then apologized. I stared at the place where the wall meets the ceiling and thought about the ways families pick their saints. We make altars to qualities that make us feel safe, charm, strength, steadiness, forgiveness. Then we punish anything that says the altar is a statue, not a god. In the morning, I woke to the smell of my own breath and the ache behind my eyes that comes from crying you couldn't quite finish. I made coffee because discipline is a lifeline. The mug warmed my hands, and I almost felt like a person. My phone buzzed with a text from Jenna, separate from the family chat. Evidence doesn't always win, she wrote. I'm sorry. Then, I believe you. It was a sentence that shouldn't be extraordinary and felt like oxygen. At 9 on the dot, I drove to my parents' house because I'm still the kind of man who shows up when summoned. The driveway still had chalk drawings of flowers from my niece. I walked inside to the smell of dish soap and last night's food and the kind of silence that bruises. Mom sat at the table with a stack of printouts I recognized as mine, the attachments I'd sent to Fam HQ, and the pen she uses for making lists that fix days. Dad had that hollowed-out look that good men wear when their tools fail them. Noah sat with his hands folded like a teenager in a principal's office. Aaron wasn't there. Paige's chair was empty. Mom started. "We think," she said, "that you owe your brother an apology." It landed with the surreal clarity of a car horn in a cathedral. "For what?" I asked. "Because you can only play dumb when the world gets this upside down. After that, asking becomes an act of faith." "For humiliating him," she said. "For making this a circus. For dragging us into it." Noah's eyes found mine. There was triumph in them, the quiet kind that comes from winning the room. He didn't have to say anything. Mom was saying it for him. Dad's silence co-signed it. "Do you believe I'm lying?" I asked. Mom's mouth tightened. "I believe you handled this wrong," she said. "You made it impossible for us to support you because you made a spectacle." "I made a record," I said. "You're the ones deciding what to see." Dad rubbed his temples. Can we move on?" he asked. "Your mother can't sleep." Noah leaned back. "We can move on," he said, "if Mark stops trying to turn us against each other." "I thought you and Aaron handled that," I said, and the line was meaner than I meant it to be. But something in me had snapped, the thin, elastic decency that keeps families from naming the shape of the knife. Mom stood, which meant the meeting was over. "We love you," she said, and I heard the full stop. "We love you, period. Conditions implied." She kissed my cheek like she had accepted a peace offering. I walked out into a day that had the gall to be beautiful. On the porch, my phone buzzed with a message from Erin. "Can we talk tonight?" she wrote. "I'm at my sister's. I think I made everything worse." I typed and deleted 4 things. I wrote, "Not tonight." She sent back a single word, "Please." I didn't answer. I sat in my car and stared at my hands on the steering wheel like they belonged to someone else. Down the block, a kid on a scooter fell and then got up without looking around to see if anyone had seen him. That felt like a sermon. I drove to the storage unit I rent for the things I keep telling myself I might need. I slid a crate to the front, winter gear, the tent we used twice, the photo albums Mom didn't have room for. I pulled an album at random. On the first page, my brother and I are 7 and 9, holding a frog like it's a fragile jewel. Dad is behind us, crouched low, ready to intervene if we hurt the thing we love. I put the album back and realized I was doing the thing my mother had spent her life doing, looking for a version of the past that would validate the present. There isn't one. There's just the frog and the boys, and the man who thought he could keep them from breaking the world, and the knowledge that sometimes you fail gently for years and then loudly for 40 seconds in a family chat you named with a heart. I thought I was going to feel relief after sending what I sent. I didn't. I felt like I had taken my house down to the studs and discovered rot in places I thought were load-bearing. The worst part wasn't that my wife had betrayed me, or that my brother had been the kind of person I always feared he might be if given the right opportunity. The worst part was that my parents looked at the mess and decided the problem was the man who pulled up the carpet. I didn't go back to the house that night. I drove until the roads got skinny and the radio faded to static and let the hum of the tires say the things I didn't trust my voice with. When I finally turned around, the sky had gone from bruised to slate. I slept on the couch with a jacket over me and woke to a text from my sister that said, "I believe you, full stop, no sermon." It didn't fix anything, but it was a hand on my back when my body kept forgetting how to stand up. The family chat quieted for a day and then filled with furniture words. Logistics. Follow-ups. We'll circle back. My mother asked for Sunday attendance like the past 48 hours were a scheduling conflict. My father sent a thumbs up because that's what men his age send when language feels like a field they can't cross without getting muddy. Noah sent nothing. Aaron sent a single sentence that managed to be both apology and accusation. I didn't respond to any of it. Muting a thread doesn't mute blood, but it's something to press when your breathing needs help. I called Paige. I didn't plan what to say because anything prepared would rot on the tongue. She answered on the second ring with my name like it surprised her and didn't. I told her I was sorry for the room, for the way truth arrives like a plate dropped in a quiet restaurant. She said she was staying with a friend and had decided not to go back for her things alone. I offered to stand in the doorway while she packed. She laughed once, the kind of laugh that says, "No one's coming to save us, but thanks for asking." "I'm not a porcelain doll," she said. "I'm the person who misjudged a man on purpose. I'll bring a friend." We agreed on nothing and ended the call with more respect than we'd ever had for each other before. The next week was a parade of practicalities. I called a lawyer and learned you can package betrayal in a manila envelope and label it irreconcilable differences so the court doesn't have to learn names. I closed the joint credit card because love should never get to spend your money after it has taken off its ring in a parking lot. I moved the photos that could survive into a shoebox and put the others into the kind of cardboard sleeve that knows it is only temporary. I made lists. Lists make a person feel like there will be a last item. Aaron asked to meet. We chose a diner because it's public and greasy and won't let you perform. She arrived in a sweater I'd bought her on a December morning when we still had a pile of small traditions we mistook for a future. She ordered coffee and a water. When the server left, she said we could handle this like adults, or like the version of ourselves the family prefers. I told her I didn't know those were different. She didn't look up. If we both agree to no fault, they'll process it faster, she said. If you insist on the other word, it will follow me into every room I ever try to work in. The other word sat between us like a shoe you don't want to name, because naming it admits someone brought it into the house. "I'm not interested in the other word," I said. "I'm interested in not lying." She looked relieved in a way that made me angry, and I didn't understand why anger can flare most at the sight of someone's relief. She thanked me, which is a strange thing for a person to do to the person they detonated. Then she took a breath that looked rehearsed and asked if I would sign something else, a joint statement to our families that used gentle verbs and kept the nouns from cutting. I told her I didn't owe anyone the soft version anymore. She smiled like a counselor grading a paper and said, I was doing better at stating needs. I almost walked out. Instead, I drank my coffee like it was a job. When I told my parents we were filing without adjectives, my mother nodded as if I had aligned myself with decency at last. "We'll rally around you both," she said, and the "you" both lodged in my throat. My father clapped my shoulder like he does when he wants to confer steadiness by friction. "You can stay in your old room a few nights if you need," he said. And I saw the twin beds and the shared dresser and the decade of my life where every victory came with a shadow that smiled like my brother. Sundays did not stop. My mother set the table as if forgiveness came on platters. The chat stayed named Fam HQ with the heart like a command. Dad talked about gutters and a weird noise in the truck. Noah flipped burgers and called the dog with a whistle that made every boy he'd ever been stand in a row behind him. Aaron started showing up in leggings and a jacket I knew was Noah's, because I knew the small hole at the cuff by heart. Paige did not show up. Her absence was the opposite of dramatic. It was a quiet that vibrated. At one of those Sundays, 2 cousins avoided eye contact, and a third hugged me as if she were smuggling contraband. My mother asked me not to bring that tone to the table. Noah said we'd all feel better if we stopped relitigating. My father corrected him, rehashing, and looked pleased to have provided a synonym. I offered to take the trash out and stood by the bins a little longer than necessary. On the fence, a carpenter bee chewed a soft groove, and I watched wood turn to dust in a neat line you could miss if you were busy arguing definitions. In the divorce, dividing things was easy, ironically. We had stuff, not children. The couch went with me because it held my body's shape, not our marriages. She kept the bed because I didn't want to teach my spine to trust a place where it had learned not to sleep. We sold the car that carried our camping gear to places we retitled as we should go back, then never did. She asked for the cast iron pan that had belonged to her grandmother. I told her to take it. Some objects belong to names, not houses. Jenna visited the month papers were filed. She sat on the floor with takeout and told me I had done the only thing a person can do when the room refuses to agree on wall color. "You left the room," she said. "That's not betrayal, that's eyesight." She didn't say anything else about anyone else. She told me about her own life, her job, the neighbor whose wind chimes had driven her into a kind of polite rage. We walked by the lake, shoes filling with sand, and I didn't feel like a science experiment. I felt like a man whose sister remembered him before and after and refused to choose between them. Paige texted, then called. We met on a bench across from a place that made Oatnoke look like a moral victory. She handed me a small envelope without explaining, and inside was a photo strip from a fair. She and Noah, 6 months after they met, making faces like two people auditioning for permanence. "I kept these too long," she said. "I thought my loyalty was a virtue. It was me wishing." She told me she'd found a studio over a bakery and loved waking to someone making bread on purpose. She said she'd given away the dress she picked for a day that no longer existed and felt lighter than she expected. "I am the sort of person who can carry a thing until it grows teeth," she said, and I said I was the sort of person who alphabetizes pain. We laughed, not because it was funny, but because somewhere in the wreckage a few sentences were still good. Time either moves or it repeats. Mine did both. I went to work, ran 3 miles outside because the treadmill looked like denial, started therapy and learned my tongue could do something besides hold back water. I went to the grocery store on Tuesdays and bought too many limes. I cleared the coat closet and found her scarf and put it in the donation bag, and then took it back out and then put it back in, which is as honest a record of progress as any bar chart. The family did not come around. They formed a shape around the absence and named it Keeping the Peace. When my mother texted photos of a barbecue and I saw Aaron and Noah in the corner of the frame like a watermark, I put my phone in a drawer and went for a run until my chest felt like it recognized me again. When my father emailed a spreadsheet of chores for the old house, he included my name and Noah's in the same cells and wrote, "Whoever," as if we were interchangeable servants to a roof. I showed up on my assigned Saturday anyway because the gutters really did need clearing, and water doesn't care about your feelings. Noah arrived late with coffees and handed me one and said, "Truce?" Like we were boys negotiating pillow territory, not men dividing a life. I said, "We're not fighting. I'm leaving you alone." And he smiled like his favorite sport was convincing people to applaud his restraint. If this story requires karma, it arrives so slowly you could mistake it for a change in climate. At Noah's company, a procurement audit found a handful of unreceipted expenses that were small enough to be boring and large enough to attract the kind of manager who enjoys the smell of rules. He hadn't charged a hotel room. He wasn't that dumb. But he had a habit of taking long lunches, of using a company Lyft to pivot between personal errands on client days, of calling favors leverage and then forgetting who wrote down the times. The reprimand was formal. The raise he thought he'd earned evaporated into a talking to. He blamed the economy. He told my parents the boss was threatened. He told Aaron some people resent success. He told himself gravity was in on the joke. Aaron's job shifted too. There was a new principal who believed in forms more than she believed in feelings, and Erin's skill was feelings. One parent complained that a counselor had been distracted at a meeting and checked her watch when a boy was crying about his dad moving out. The complaint could have been anyone. The principal made it Erin's problem. She took a mandatory training that rephrased compassion as workflow, and she took it like a person who suspects she is being told to become a clock. She started to smell like a person whose work had stopped feeding her. On Sundays, she came to my mother's, in sweaters too warm for the weather, and left early with a reason that sounded like a polite cough. Paige saw Noah once on the sidewalk. She told me later he looked like a man who had won his own game and found the trophy was heavy. He did not look sorry, she said. He looked busy and bored. I understood the combination. It's what happens when a person gets everything he thought would make him feel new and discovers he brought himself along. The first holiday without me at the table was Easter. My mother sent a photo of a ham-like proof that tradition could still hold a shape. I ate lukewarm Thai food on my couch and watched a documentary about sea creatures that light themselves up when they're deep enough to be invisible otherwise. I texted Jenna a picture of the green curry, and she sent back a photo of her cat wearing a plastic egg half as a hat. We were ridiculous and okay. When my father called later to ask if I might come by for pie, I said, "Not tonight," and he said that was fine, and both of us understood it was not. He handed the phone to my mother, and she told me the lilies had bloomed early. I told her to keep the cat from eating them. It was an ordinary exchange that felt like a treaty. When she hung up, she said, "I love you." I said, "I love you too." Love is a word that does a lot of heavy lifting, even when it has nowhere specific to place the weight. In June, my father fell from a stepladder while swapping out a porch light bulb because his hands had started to shake, and stubbornness has no setting between off and high. He cracked his wrist and scared the hell out of everyone. I drove to the emergency room in the kind of traffic that makes small sins easy and big ones expensive. In the waiting room, my mother cried into a tissue like it owed her quiet. Noah paced and asked for status every 8 minutes. Erin sat next to my mother and pressed a hand to her back, and I wondered if this was the shape some people learn love in: touch first, confession later. When the doctor came out and said words like stable and overnight for observation, Noah exhaled as if he'd been holding his breath for a decade. He told an anecdote about Dad fixing a broken fence with duct tape and prayer. Erin smiled. My mother dabbed at her eyes and said, "We are lucky. We are so lucky." I stood there with my hands in my pockets and realized luck had become our family's religion because it let us avoid saying we'd built scaffolding with rotten wood. After we took my father home, Noah asked to talk. We sat on the porch while Mom reheated soup inside, and Erin put clean sheets on the guest bed. He told me this wasn't sustainable. The Cold War, the empty chairs at holidays, the quiet civil war in which our mother tried to feed both armies. He said the words men say when they are very tired of the consequences of their own momentum. "What do you want from me?" he asked. It was a generous question but wrong, because wanting from him felt like returning to a store that sells you a suit with one sleeve. "I don't want anything," I said. "That's why you can't figure out how to give it." He squinted the way he does when he's trying to see the win, and the win is a line he doesn't recognize. "I could apologize again," he said. "I could apologize every day. It won't satisfy you." "It won't change anything," I said, and something in my voice made him step back. "You are a person I can't be around right now without losing parts I need. That's the whole math. I'm done buying the special price for you." He nodded like he was filing it under things Mark says when he's being dramatic. We shook hands because that's what brothers do when their rituals have run out of context and they're afraid to leave a thing entirely empty. 2 weeks later, my mother asked me to dinner alone for the first time since I'd left. She made the meal you make when you need a conversation to behave: meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans so cooked you could eat them with a spoon. She told me she was tired, the kind of tired that a nap can't touch. She said she knew I had told the truth, and she knew she had reached for the nearest hand anyway, and that hand had been Noah's. She said, "You are not easier, Mark. You are steadier, Mark. And sometimes steadiness asks more of me than I want to be asked." I told her steadiness asks more of me than I want to be asked too. We ate in a silence that had some air in it. After dinner, she handed me a small box with a ring inside. My grandmother's ring, the one Erin had worn for 5 years with her own band. "I don't know how to mail this without making it mean something I don't mean," she said. I told her I'd take it to the jeweler and have it cleaned and sized down for no one in particular, then put it back into the safe until meaning presented itself. She nodded and looked like she might finally sleep. We washed the dishes together without the old choreography, bumping into each other, apologizing, laughing once at the way the plate rack tilted. It felt like a first draft. By late summer, Erin and Noah moved in together because anything else would require more imagination than either of them had left. They posted a photo of a couch in a place with exposed brick and a plant in a pot so big it looked like it had its own mortgage. The caption was about new beginnings, and maybe it was. Maybe there are people who can pour the old wine into a new glass and convince themselves it tastes like something else. The likes arrived in the usual pattern. The comments used the word happy like a seasoning. I dated a little. It felt like teaching my mouth a new language with an accent it hadn't chosen, and you can't rush that. I told the truth about my life without drawing a diagram. I learned to tell stories that didn't pivot to a lesson halfway through because the other person wasn't a student. I met a woman who reads weather radar for fun, and another who could fix a bicycle chain, blindfolded, and a third who didn't drink and still laughed like a person who had not been told 100 times to be quieter. No grand finales. A handful of good coffees, and one almost kiss on a bridge when the river performed its usual trick of reflecting a city back at itself, prettier than it is. On a Tuesday in September, Erin called. The call surprised me more than seeing her name light my phone. I answered because I didn't know I was going to. She sounded like someone who had run out of holding. She said she was sorry for using the word cruel in the kitchen. She said she was learning the difference between being found out and coming clean. She said Noah was Noah, and she was tired of pretending the spin only made her dizzy when it makes everyone dizzy. She said she still loved me in some way that wasn't useful. I said thank you for the apology. I said I hoped she would be the person her students thought she was. She cried quietly and then hung up. I stood at the window and watched a man parallel park with too much confidence and not enough practice. He bumped the curb 4 times and then nailed it like he'd never learned anything, the easy way. If you want a reckoning, here it is. My brother did not become a villain in public, not in the way the internet rewards. He kept his job. He got a later promotion than he wanted and called it a lesson in patience. He married Erin at the courthouse with my parents and an orchid, and a photo that looked like 2 people holding their breath underwater. The family chat sent 12 hearts. Jenna sent none. I sent a text to my mother that said, "I'm not a witness," and she replied, "I know." At Thanksgiving, they passed a bowl without saying my name, and no one choked. Sometimes, karma doesn't flatten people. Sometimes, it rearranges the furniture until they can't find the door. My father's wrist healed crooked. He complains only when the weather tells on him. He and I built a shelf in the garage one Saturday, and he apologized for not knowing how to be in 2 loyalties at once. I told him loyalty without accountability is just a nice word for avoidance. He nodded. "That's a good sentence," he said, and I loved him so much in that second that if he'd asked me to pretend again, I might have. He didn't. In winter, my mother asked if I would consider Christmas Eve. I told her I'd do Christmas morning, early, before anyone else arrived. I came at 7 with cinnamon rolls in a tin and coffee that burned a little, and we sat in the living room with only the tree on, the house quiet like it could remember us kinder. We opened the one present we agreed we'd exchange, something small and ridiculous, a jigsaw puzzle that was just a photograph of the family home from above, all rooflines and shadows. My mother cried for a minute, and then we put a few pieces together, and then I left before the others came. We made a ritual out of a corner of the day. You can build a life on corners if you stop pretending you own the whole room. I will not pretend I am magnanimous or pure. I am not. Some nights, I imagine a version of events where every person who made the wrong choice went to bed with a stomachache that taught them morals better than sermons. Most days, I simply go to work, move my body, write down the next thing, leave the phone face down, and sleep most of the night. There is a kind of peace in losing the audience that never clapped for you sincerely. The family remains divided in the way tectonic plates are divided, touching, grinding, occasionally sending a tremor through the dishes. Jenna visits when I visit. My parents drive into the city once a month, and we eat at a diner where the eggs taste like they've been thinking about eggs for 30 years. Sometimes my mother tells stories about something Aaron said that was kind, or about a time Noah fixed a thing that truly needed fixing. I listen. It doesn't hurt like it used to, it hurts like weather. Once in spring, Paige and I saw Aaron on the train. Not together. Paige was coming from a concert, I was coming from a late shift. Aaron sat 3 rows ahead, hands in her lap like she was practicing arrival. She didn't see us. When I got off, Paige texted that she'd watched Aaron mouth the words to a song only she could hear, and that she hoped Aaron had found a little room in her life that didn't require audience. I texted back that I hoped the same for Noah. Then I laughed, because I didn't, and I am working on being a person who doesn't pretend his hopes are more generous than they are. If you have read this far, you might be waiting for a dramatic twist. There isn't one. There is the slow turn toward a life that makes sense when you're alone in a kitchen at 6 in the morning making coffee for one. There is the quiet slice of a knife through an orange and the way the smell cuts the air like permission. There is the decision not to attend a birthday party and the equal decision to drop by the next day with leftover cake because sweetness should not be wasted. There is the way a man learns to be loyal to the version of himself who still believes in labels and ladders and little jobs done well. It isn't glamorous. It's not even a story, not the kind that earns applause. It's a long walk home with no parade and a key that still fits. Tell me what you would have done. Would you have kept it quiet to save the family brand? Or drop the files like I did and let the splits show where they already existed? Drop your take in the comments and tell me if you think I handled this like a grown-up or a grenade. If this kind of messy, real story kept you listening, hit like so. It reaches the next person who needs proof they're not the only one living without a script, and subscribe for more. I'll keep telling them the way they happened, without fancy endings, because sometimes the most shocking thing is how ordinary the truth looks in daylight.